Welcome. I am continuing weaving my ravenstail robe. My name is Evelyn Vanderhoot. My Haida name is Kajuth, and I have been weaving these robes for, I don't know, near 30 years. And before that I was a watercolor artist. But my mother inspired me to go into weaving. I'm from a weaving family. My Nani, my grandmother, is Selena Paradovich, and she had been the first college professor in our family as far as her being able to teach the traditional arts through the University of Alaska Southeast. And so she, when she was alive, kept weaving alive to continue their great art. And my mother has stepped into that role where she travels around Southeast Alaska. She's now in her 90s and very strong in mind and in body, and so she's able to travel. I think she's going up to Juneau this week. But anyway, it runs in my family. And so welcome as you're watching me weave. What I've been doing is demonstrating the weaving and the different techniques, and then oftentimes I'll read stories that were collected in around the early 1900s by various people. I'm going to today continue weaving and demonstrating, and I will be reading and narrating the rest of the story that I started the last broadcast, which is a Tsimshian story that was taken down by Boaz and a Mr. Tate, a Tsimshian from Port Simpson. So I'll continue that story because it was a long story and it needed an intermission. Anyway, welcome, and I hope you enjoy. So I'm continuing the story of the meeting on the ice. And if you remember, the mother and the daughter come together from two different villages to meet on the ice and hopefully to feed each other. Their husbands had died. And the man, and one morning the woman gets up and she hears a bird cry. And when she goes out, she heard the one sing whose name is Hatsinas. It is like a robin, but it is not he. When somebody hears Hatsinas speak, he has good luck with whatever he wishes. That is the reason why the name of that bird is Hatsinas, good luck. So anyway, the woman hears the bird, and then she goes to an old spruce tree, and lo and behold, each morning as she gathers bark, she is able to get land animals for food, and they thrive. And it turns out that Hatsinas was the young man that visited the young woman initially. So he comes forward and admits that he's the one that's been providing the food from the spruce tree. So then they marry, and I'm going to continue the story. Then they built 2 large houses to dry the meat. After a good while, a boy was born. Then the child grew up. His father was very glad. Therefore, one day he called his child to himself, and then he took hold of his forehead and pulled it. Then the young man was of good size. The father of the child was this Hatsinas, that one who came to the women at their camp. That one was a handsome young man, that Hatsinas. Then all the people of the Skeena heard that the 2 women were doing who had found Hatsinas. Their house was full of all kinds of dry meat. Therefore all of the people up the Skeena assembled to buy dry meat from the women. And after some of them they were very rich from trading dry meat with all the villages all around. There was a famine, therefore they bought meat. Before the starving people came to trade, Hatsinas gave to his son after he had finished pulling him, and when he had become a young man, he gave him his bow and 4 arrows and a lance and a hat and a cane and a basket and a bark raincoat. That is what he gave to his son. Then he gave him advice. Whenever you get into difficulty or among dangers, I shall come to help you, and you shall be stronger than your enemies. Then he stopped speaking here. He talked to his son. Then he suddenly disappeared, and they did not see him again. Behold, however, it increased the numbers who came to trade all kinds of things. Then the old woman died. Therefore the princess gave a great potlatch and called together all the different villages. Then she called the name of her son. Atswal was what the father gave him to be his name. Astiwal. He was a great hunter, and he hunted the animals of the woods. He knew how to hunt all the animals of the woods and all kinds of birds. Then his mother, on her part, returned to her relatives at Canyon, and her son accompanied her. All the people knew that the prince was a great hunter, and his fame was all over the world, and the animals also knew him. One day in winter, when the ice was spread out again, a white bear ran out of the woods in front of the town. Then it went down the river on the ice. Then the hunters along the upper course of the river pursued it, but they missed it when they shot at it, and their lances broke, and the white bear continued going down the river. It was then when the white bear came to another village that the hunters went out again to try to kill it. Again it ran out of the woods at a camp. Again the hunters went out to kill it, but they could not do it. They were unable to hit it, and the white bear continued to go down the Skeena River on the ice. Then all the hunters from the villages really pursued it. Then the white bear also reached the town of which Asdiwal lived. Then he got ready and put on his hunting apparel. He took his quiver and his lance, bows and arrows, hat, mat, and his little basket. He put on his snowshoes, and then he, on his part, ran in pursuit as though a bird was flying. However, the great white bear, on its part, also ran very quickly, and it ran down the river. But he, on his part, was in close pursuit. When the great white bear became tired, it went up the mountain. Asdiwal was in close pursuit of it. Then the great white bear suddenly arrived on the crest of the great mountain. But he, on his part, was in close pursuit. Both of them suddenly arrived on the crest of the mountain. Then the great white bear was very tired, and the white bear verily kicked the top of the great mountain. Then the great one suddenly split, and suddenly there was a gorge. The great white bear was suddenly on the other side for a while and refreshed itself. Asdiwal, however, could not get across. Then he took his lance and placed it end to end with his quiver, and he laid them across the great gorge. Then he went across. When he got across to the other side of the gorge, he took back his quiver and his lance, and he ran quickly again, like a bird flying in the air. He almost overtook it. When he really was about to overtake it, the white bear again kicked the top of the mountain, and the rock split again, and suddenly there was a great gorge. Then Asdiwal again took his bow and his arrows and put them end to end. Then he laid them across the great gorge, and then again he was able to cross. When he saw the white bear running before him, he suddenly reached a great plain at the very end of the top of the mountain. After a good while, behold, Asdiwal suddenly saw a large ladder standing on our world. It stood on top of the mountain towards the sky. Behold, the white bear went up, and he followed it on the ladder. Then the man also went up. The white bear reached the top of the great ladder, and Asdiwal also suddenly reached the top. That was where the young man also reached the top of the great ladder. And then he found a great prairie. It was quite green with grass, and there were all kinds of flowers. Everything sweet-smelling was on the great prairie. It was that among which the little path lay. This was the one that the great white bear followed. Then Asdiwal also followed in the path. He kept the same distance, and behold, the path led to the outside of a great house which stood across the way in the middle of the great prairie. The white bear suddenly went in, and Asdiwal also suddenly reached it. He stood against the door and looked in through the little hole. Behold, it was a young woman whom he had followed, and who took off her white bear blanket and put it really away. Then the great chief questioned the young woman and said, "Did you not get what you went for, child?" "It is standing outside behind the house," said the young woman. "I am almost dead with fatigue." Then said the chief, "Accompany him in." Then they went out and took Ostiwal. The great slave of the chief, however, took her white bearskin blanket and shook off the ashes. Then he took it away from the fire to the rear of the house. This chief was the son. That one said to the young woman while the young man was sitting down on the other side of the great fire, "My child, you may come towards the fire and sit down where this prince is sitting. He shall marry you." Then the princess went towards the fire and sat down with the young man. Then the woman loved her husband very much. Therefore, when they were lying down, the woman said to her husband, "Prepare yourself for everything with which my father will try to kill you." Okay, so this is the end of my reading today and my weaving today. I hope you come back for the rest of the story and to see my weaving again. Hawa.